Hi, I'm Sophie. I was a midwife in the NHS for 10 years and now I'm the head of clinical at Medbrief.
Hi, I'm Abby. I was a midwife in the NHS for 16 years and now I'm a clinical supervisor at Medbrief.
It's our Christmas special episode and we've gathered some stories from our clinical team about what Christmas looks like behind the scenes in the NHS. We'll start with our first story from our very own Sharon Sumner. Thanks for your story. It was Christmas Eve and I had just come onto the night shift. We'd had a call through triage that a woman and her partner were coming into the birth unit as she was in active labour. So I began to prepare the room and ran the birth pool. She was a para 2, so it was likely to be a quick birth, given that she'd had 2 normal births previously. She lived close by, so it was deemed reasonable to make their own way to the hospital. Some time passed, then some more, and by this point I was thinking a little too much time. We were beginning to get concerned, so we called their mobile number, but there was no answer. We suddenly had an urgent call from security asking for immediate assistance to the Christmas tree outside the unit as a woman was giving birth there. Security had been alerted to a couple arguing outside as the partner was trying to get her to come into the hospital and the woman had collapsed under the tree in advanced labour. We grabbed our kit and rushed down, by which time she had already given birth. All ended well and the baby was fine. They named him Joseph.
That's a fantastic story. I love the festive names as well. I had one Christmas Eve. We had one that was called Eve, had one that was called Noel.
I had a Rudy instead of Rudolph, which I thought was cute. And it was Rudy on the birth certificate. Like, that was the government name, which I really liked. I think that's the most Christmassy name I've had. We have had an Eve, actually, and a Noel. So, yeah, the other gender to your one. We, as kind of student midwives and midwives, we were not kind of... we didn't sort of prepare necessarily for a festive birth under a tree particularly. That wasn't a skill we had to sign off, but a grab bag and run was something we did have quite a lot in my unit. It was never under a tree. Sounds quite magical really, doesn't it? Although I'm sure it wasn't.
Very Christmas festive with the lights.
I bet the security team were also quite alarmed by that call. But I think, by the time they'd got there, she'd done all the hard work herself anyway. And yeah, was probably in bed with tea and toast 20 minutes later, which sounds delightful.
The next memory is from Amanda, one of our other clinical supervisors. She says, I was working as a community midwife at a home birth just before Christmas. And I'll never forget the feeling of coming home after the birth to a lit up Christmas tree, a fire, and spending the evening drinking Prosecco and eating mince pies. It was amazing. I worked multiple Christmases in the NHS, and although my family were always like, oh, that's really sad to work Christmas, I think particularly working on maternity, it was a really nice experience. We'd have, in the break room, they'd usually have a whole table full of snacks and squashes and drinks that we could have. And everyone would always be in a festive mood. You'd have a little festive headwear. And we would people would just be really friendly and jolly and make the most of it. It was lovely. I worked quite a few Christmas Eves. And so, you would work Christmas Eve night and everyone would be desperate to get the first Christmas baby.
We had that as well. I think as well, the families were desperate to have the baby on Christmas Eve because they wanted separation from 2, celebrations, I suppose. I actually had a set of twins once and the first twin was born Christmas Eve and the second twin was just born on Christmas Day. So even though they were identical, they were born on different days by a couple of minutes either side. And I just remember looking at their dad and he just went, it's going to be an expensive month every December. And I'll never forget that. But we always had a nice time of it. It was a nice day to work. Like you say, most people were sort of jolly and festive because you had to make the most of it when you're away from your sort of family, but you're with your work family and you do have relationships with your colleagues that, because you've seen so many things and been through so many situations together, some happy, some sad, some traumatic, you feel like you know them really well, even in that sort of scenario. And, the catering staff on the wards would have Christmas dinners and things like that. And there's sometimes some leftovers, which is always delightful. And, again, you'd have people popping in with treats and biscuits and things like that. And yeah, that first Christmas baby special though, I think on each unit, that's a big celebration. I know in some units they give out special baby hats that look like little Santa's hats and things, which is sweet. So I think for any family or parent to be that's worried about having their baby on Christmas Day, don't be. We can make it as good an experience as any other day of the year. And you might get a little festive Santa hat out of it as well.
I remember we did Christmas outfits, particularly for the first Christmas baby. They had like you'll be a Christmas pudding or a snowman or something, and they just looked so cute. It was just like, oh. And one year I remember having to go into the NICU, which is for the small, either very premature or very sick babies, and every single incubator that the babies were in had a little stocking. So they had a little stocking, and they had a little Santa hat. They had a little stocking, and I was like, this is so cute. Even in that kind of, high stress environment, they made it festive, and they had the Christmas tree up, and it was great.
We all love a bit of sparkle wherever we can. I'm all for having a Christmas tree up as long as is, possible. As long as everybody else is on board, I think it's always good to have a bit of extra sparkle. And like I say, the nights are dark, the mornings are dark, so wherever you can get a bit of a twinkle is good.
Yeah, and the wards usually put their Christmas decorations up quite early, and that was always my favourite things to help with the Christmas decorations when it was quiet enough, because it's always, makes it look much more festive and homely, I think, with Christmas decorations. And one thing I did remember, my last Christmas I worked, the hospital made it so that every staff member got a free Christmas breakfast. So if you worked the night shift, you got a Christmas breakfast. And if you worked the day shift, they gave you Christmas lunch. I was quite surprised. I don't know if they do that everywhere, but they did where I worked that year.
And arguably that might be better than some other people's cooking.
Definitely better than my cooking.
Controversial. But I think, I was always one to offer to work the Christmas shifts. I was never sort of afraid to do it. I think because I didn't have sort of a young family of my own, I was the child in my family. So, I think Christmas Eve night was one of my favourites if I could pick, because then I could have a little nap and then join in with the rest of things. Because my mum's a Christmas Day baby, that's her birthday too. So we always do Christmas in the morning, it's her birthday in the afternoon. So we kind of, it's always been a time where the family's been together. And I missed 10 years. I did every single year working as a midwife on some type of shift. And I don't regret it.
I think it's just a completely different environment at Christmas. And I remember even some of the consultants that weren't on would come in and they'd bring in one year they brought in boxes of oranges. I can't remember why. But anyway, we had oranges, or they'd bring in drinks or snacks. And it was just, really quite friendly, even if it was, a really busy shift. For some reason, it hit different because it was Christmas.
I think seeing the most senior consultant that, might have a bit of a reputation for having, might be a bit short or a bit brash sometimes, wearing a Santa hat, there's nothing more humbling than people wearing festive headwear when they have a reputation of being a bit scary. So I do think it's a celebration that brings people together. And, birth is a celebration. And I think, adding the two things together is just a lovely thing.
And obviously sometimes if you're at home and you've had a Christmas baby and then you've got the community midwife visiting, I've done that on Christmas Day. There's usually on Christmas Eve a mass exodus. If you have your baby Christmas Eve, everyone is desperate to get home. But yeah, the Christmas Day visiting, a lot of people don't want a bit visit. But if you go around the houses, again, everyone's always really welcoming, and you've got your Christmas earrings, Christmas headgear. The only time you're allowed that in the NHS. So it was always nice to go and see families on Christmas Day and see their celebrations too.
They always leave with arms full of chocolates and treats and, do you want a turkey sandwich? Do you want this? I'm just like, no, thank you. I've got another 10 of these. But yeah, no, I think there's just something tangible about Christmas. I mean, even coming here today, you're driving under all the Christmas lights, and there's sort of German markets on at the moment, which is really popular, and you can just smell Christmas in the air. And I just think, working in a hospital, especially on maternity, is an enjoyable experience mostly, I think. Our final memory is from Jess, again, another food-related one. The first year I was qualified, I was on the Christmas night shift with 2 other newly qualified Band 5 midwives I had trained with. My husband bought us bacon sandwiches at 7 a.m. We treated him as if he was the second coming of Jesus. We can all relate to that. That first snack after a night shift does hit different. So, a bacon sandwich at 7 a.m. 10 out of 10 for that husband.
Do you think that's the other thing? about Christmas, working Christmas though as well, because bringing the food and then, you go home, you arrive at your house, your family are there, if you're in the night shift, obviously, and then everyone sits down and they bring you a drink and food.
You do get looked after, don't you? You do. And everyone's like, oh, you're so wonderful for having worked it. And I think I've just had a really nice night, actually. But yes, wait on me. That's fine as well. I will wear the Christmas crown.
Bring me all the snacks.
I need 10 mince pies per hour, at least. Yeah, no, completely agree. What's something the public wouldn't realise about working in the NHS over Christmas?
I think the thing that would surprise a lot of people is how busy it is on Christmas Day. It is just like any other day in many respects. I think sometimes in the morning, people sort of think, oh, I'm going to, I might be in early labour, but I'm going to hold it so that I can open my presents with my kids, or I might get my Christmas lunch before I come in. And then sort of particularly after about lunchtime, there's definitely an influx on a labour ward because people are like, no, really can't. I really am in labour. I really must go in. But it is just as busy.
Babies don't read a manual, do they? So if they're coming that day. There's no sort of the X means you can't be born today. Like, I refuse. They're coming when they're coming. And I think that's something that people definitely don't realise. I think another thing is that people don't think that it's fully staffed, and they think that maybe it's sort of skeleton staff and it's just as staffed as any other day. So you are just as safe, you are just as able to get the care that you need. The consultant isn't at home with their feet up having an eggnog. They are on the ward waiting, to be able to help if they need to. They just might be wearing festive headwear. But I think that's another sort of myth, I suppose. People think the same of weekends though. Oh, well, there's not as many doctors and midwives on a weekend. It's not true. It's the same 24/7, 365 days a year. Christmas is included in that. Generally as well, like staffing at Christmas is one of two ways. You either take it because it's your turn, and people did do that, didn't they? And they did think, I didn't do the last 2 years, it is my turn to do it. And you might be a bit disappointed initially, but we try to make the best of it. Or you get people like me that would sign up immediately. I always loved that shift, and the thought of knowing that my colleagues could go home and celebrate Christmas with their small children and create memories and things with their families meant a lot to me, and meant that I could take my birthday off, for example, or someone would be willing to swap that shift with me later. I always enjoyed the shift and would never mind doing it, not because I'm a saint, just because I didn't feel like I kind of had the grounds to kind of request it off necessarily. And like I say, it's my mum's birthday on Christmas Day and I love the festive time, but I just know that kind of relief on my colleagues' faces so that they got the day off was just worth it for me.
And we used to do alternate Christmases, but also like if you weren't working Christmas, you'd probably work New Year. And that was a different experience as well, working New Year. I once worked in London next to the Houses of Parliament. So I got to watch on New Year's the fireworks go off, which was absolutely amazing. Like, the amount of people that stay there and they pay loads of money and they have to get all cramped in to watch them, and we were just working and just like looking at the fireworks, which was pretty cool. So yeah, the alternate, don't you, between Christmas and New Year. So again, both quite nice shifts, both have the tray of food. I feel like we're very food orientated. Got the food laid out in the break room and stuff for that as well. So again, people want the first New Year's baby as well.
Yeah, I feel like that's more competitive than Christmas actually, because a new baby in a new year is always, I don't know, that's always something to celebrate.
Did you say that they had a special outfit?
Yeah, so the first baby born on any new year were gifted a sort of baby grow born in whatever the year was, and they would have that. And typically the local newspaper would come in the next day, so the first, to take pictures of that family if they were willing to, and that was quite a tradition as well. And they would be in the paper. And you find that people either hold on or are desperate to have like a 2025 baby, or they want a 2026, and you'll find that. I think it depends on when their due date is. I think if you think that your baby's going to be a 2026 baby, you might already have stuff that says that on it. People are like, not today, not today. But yeah, babies don't read. So yeah. Yeah, there's definitely some crossover between New Year's and Christmas, but I definitely think for families it's nice for them to spend Christmas Day together as a tradition.
I actually think as well that in talking about the first Christmas baby, again, thinking about that, it's linked to my head, I think there's a midwife what's the word, like a midwife, you're competing, that's it, you're competing to, can you be the one to deliver the first Christmas baby or be at the birth of the first Christmas baby?
And as someone who worked consecutive Christmases by choice, like I wanted to be the one that had the most Christmas babies. So I was always like, come on, let's go, trying to egg them on to push that a little bit harder. I'm a very competitive person, so that was definitely me on shift for sure. But yeah. It's a lovely time working in the NHS at Christmas. I think it is challenging initially. I think the thought is worse than what actually it feels like on shift. And we really do try to make a difference. And we appreciate that people are away from home, sometimes in scary situations, sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes in pain. But, hopefully a good story to tell when they get home.
So how have you been able to bring Christmas cheer when people haven't been able to leave the hospital for Christmas?
It's such a hard one. I think because you're a staff member who also is there at Christmas, I think you can relate to that in some way. Obviously, you'll be able to leave at the end of your shift, which I guess is a little bit different. I think it's spending more time with them. It's also making sure that you kind of give a bit of empathy and understanding. We know it's hard that you're here, but it's the right thing to do for, your current situation. It's also kind of inviting them to start new traditions potentially in that space, take extra pictures for them, offer them that Christmas lunch, that extra mince pie that was left in the staff room, something that would just bring them a bit of extra cheer, I suppose, where possible. How about you?
Yeah, and I think trying to encourage contact with family, whether that's, the family being able to come in at visiting times. Sometimes it relaxes a little on Christmas Day, or things like, encouraging, we've all got phones now, could do FaceTimes, people can have a family meeting, that kind of, just so they don't feel so on their own at Christmas.
If you could design the perfect Christmas lunch on shift on Christmas Day, what would it be?
Similar to a Christmas dinner, but not like a full Christmas dinner, because no one's going to need the full weight of that. And then hopefully, you're going to be able to have like chocolate and stuff. You have to have room for your chocolate and your pudding afterwards. So I am a big fan of like anything that can have cranberry sauce and gravy, roast potatoes. I am veggie, but before that, turkey.
I think so long as, like you say, you're not too full, because can you imagine in Sharon's story running outside to birth Joseph under the Christmas tree and you've just eaten like a 3-course meal? That run is going to be slower.
Yeah, not thought about that. We need to be, able to run if needed.
I think so long as, because what always made me laugh is I would absolutely and happily have whatever was offered, a mince pie, Terry chocolate orange, a little roast dinner, and then I'll go home and have the real one as well. So then I think in 24 hours, I've had 2 Christmas dinners. I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry about that.
No, I think people sometimes have 2 Christmas dinners anyway if they're going between 2 halves of the family. So I think it's fine. I think it's been really nice to like have a chat about all our nice Christmas memories from working in the NHS. I think working in the NHS at Christmas can be a really positive, nice time, full of lots of team spirit, and trying to make it as special as you can for your patients, considering that they don't always, want to be in the hospital in that time. It's been nice to kind of look back and talk about the positive aspects that we remember.
But we also do acknowledge that Christmas can be a challenging time, people being away from their family. Sometimes they are visiting family, so they're away from home as well. So that's always important. And also thinking about those staff members that reluctantly do their shifts because it's their turn, but they would much rather be with their families. We do appreciate your service, and we do appreciate the care that you give those patients when it might not be your favourite shift to work. We hope that when you work with colleagues like us who are very festive, we can compensate for that and you'll have as nice a time as you can. And then you can get home and celebrate with your families.
I want to give all the gratitude to people working in the NHS this Christmas. We just wanted to say thank you to everyone at MedBrief for sharing their Christmas stories with us for this discussion today.
And we'd like to wish everybody watching and listening this podcast a very Merry Christmas from us at MedBrief.